Good afternoon. Today I will talk about the case of Karla Pontigo and how it helps us understand gender-based violence, human rights violations, and the challenges of access to justice in Mexico. To begin, it's important to understand the context of the case. Karla Pontigo was a young woman who died in 2012 in San Luis Potosí under highly suspicious circumstances. According to the initial version given by authorities, her injuries were the result of an accident involving a glass door. However, the explanation quickly raised doubts. Her body showed multiple injuries that were not consistent with a simple accident, and there were serious irregularities in how the investigation was conducted. For example, the crime scene was not properly secured, key evidence was lost or contaminated, and the forensic analysis lacked rigor. Additionally, authorities failed to consider from the beginning that her death could be the result of gender-based violence. This initial misclassification shaped the entire investigation and limited the possibility of justice. Why this case is relevant? The case of Karla Pontigo is highly relevant because it reflects a systematic issue, the normalization and invisibilization of violence against women. In many cases, when women are victims of violent death, authorities tend to assume alternative explanations, such as accidents or suicides, without thoroughly investigating the possibility of femicide. This reflects underlying gender biases within institutions. This case also shows the importance of applying a gender perspective. A gender perspective means recognizing that violence against women is often rooted in structural inequality, discrimination, and a power imbalance. Without the perspective, authorities may ignore patterns of violence that are crucial to understanding what actually happened. Furthermore, this case gained international attention and became a symbol of the struggle for justice in Mexico. It demonstrates how families often have to fight not only for justice, but also against the institutions that are supposed to protect them. Human rights violations committed by the state. There are several human rights violations in this case, but I will focus on the most important ones. First, the violation of the right to access to justice. The state has the obligation to investigate deaths in serious, impartial, and effective way. In this case, authorities failed to meet that obligation. From the beginning, there was negligence in the investigation, which prevented the clarification of the facts and delayed justice. Second, the violation of right to the truth. The family of Karla Pontigo had the right to know what really happened. However, due to inconsistencies, lack of transparency, and errors in the investigation, the truth was obscured. This caused additional suffering to the family and prolonged their search for answers. Third, the violation of due process. Due process requires that the investigation follows legal standards and respect procedures. In this case, evidence was mishandled and forensic reports were incomplete or contradictory, and there was a lack of professionalism in key stages of the investigation. Finally, there was a clear failure to act with due diligence and a gender perspective. International human rights standards establishes that states must investigate all violent deaths of women as a potential femicide, but not doing so, authorities failed to fulfill their obligations. What actions that the state should take? Given these violations, it is essential to identify what the state should do to repair the harm and prevent similar cases. First, the state must provide integral reparation to the family. This includes financial compensation, but also symbolic measures such as public apology and official recognition of responsibility. Psychological support should be also provided to address the emotional impact of the case. Second, there must be a proper and effective investigation. Even if time has passed, authorities have the responsibility to continue investigating using modern techniques as a gender perspective. Justice should not depend on how much time has passed. Third, the state must train its officials. Police officers, prosecutors, and forensic experts must be educated on how to handle the cases of gender-based violence. This includes understanding patterns of abuse, preserving evidence, and avoiding biases. Fourth, it is necessary to strengthen institutional protocols. There should be clear and mandatory guidelines to ensure that all violent deaths of women are investigated as potential femicides from the start. This reduces the risk of misclassification and negligence. Fifth, there must be accountability. Public officials who fail to perform their duty should be consequences. Without accountability, this type of errors are likely to be repeated. Finally, the state should promote broader cultural change. This includes public policies aimed to preventing gender-based violence, promoting equality, and raising awareness in society. Personal reflection. From a personal perspective, the case of Karla Pontigo leaves several important lessons. First, it shows us that justice is not guaranteed. Even when rights are recognized in law, they can be violent in practice if institutions do not act properly. Second, it highlights the importance of demanding accountability without pressure from society and the families of victims. Many cases would remain ignored. Third, it reminds us that gender-based violence is not only an individual problem, but a structural one. It is linked to inequality, discrimination, and cultural attitudes that must be addressed. Finally, this case teaches us that human rights require active protection. They are not principles written in documents. They depend on the actions of the governments, institutions, and society as a whole. In conclusion, the case of Karla Pontigo is a powerful example of how gender violence and institutional failures intersect. It shows us that improving access to justice requires more than laws, it requires commitment, training, accountability, and a real understanding of gender issues. Most important, it reminds us that behind every case there is a human life, a family, and a demand for truth and dignity that must not be ignored. Thank you.